Alright guys, so as you can see we've got something a little bit different here. We've got two watches, they're both from Berny. One's the old one, one's the new one. So we're going to be comparing this new T2566M to the older T2526M. So there's a few little differences between these, some of which you'll probably notice straight away, but we're going to go into detail and do a step-by-step comparison between the two, going over all the little details. So as I say, this is a slightly different review than usual. So the first things you're probably going to notice is that we've got slightly different finishes on these cases. They're both titanium, but one, the older version, the one on the left, has got that polished bezel, whereas the newer version has got just a clean, just matte titanium finish. So very different finishes on both of them, but let me know, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the new one or do you prefer the older style? So now let's get onto the dimensions. So there's quite a few little subtle differences, but then there are some bits that are the same as well. So to begin with, you're probably going to notice the lugs on the older one are a bit longer. Also, the thickness is slightly different too. As you can see when I put them side by side, they've got very different case profiles. One's got slightly more curved lugs, the other one's got the longer, less curved lugs. So this is reflected in the dimensions. So we've got 37mm on both, diameter. Then we've got 8.5mm for the thickness on the older version, whereas it's 8.9 on the new one. They're both 20mm lug width, but then it's the lug to lug where they really differ. So the older version is 45mm, which is still really good, but then the newer one is even smaller at 42.5. So that'll fit even smaller wrists. If you've got a really small wrist, this will be ideal. It's just a more compact design. The other lugs on the older one were a little on the long side, weren't quite in proportion with the case I don't think. So when it comes to the dials, there's also some differences here as well. So the older version actually has a date window at the 3 o'clock, and it's also got that Berny branding at the top just above the logo. So the newer version, they don't have the date wheel, they've got rid of that. They've also got rid of that Berny branding, they've just got the logo now, so it's a lot cleaner, which I do prefer. So the main difference between these two is when it comes to the movements. So the older version has got the Miyota 2S60, which is a normal standard quartz movement. So we've got that ticking as you'd expect from a quartz movement. This new one has got the VH31, so that's got that smooth sweep, almost like a mechanical movement, an automatic movement, so it's just a lot more aesthetically pleasing. When it comes to the crystals on these, they're both Sapphire Crystal, which is always good to see. And then the next big difference is when it comes to the crowns. You probably noticed that they're in different positions, so this one's at the 3 o'clock, whereas the other one's at the 4. And also when it comes to the size of them, there's quite a big difference too. The newer version has a far smaller crown, which some people may think is a bad thing, but in my experience, using it's not too bad. So another difference between these is when it comes to the straps. So this new one has a two-piece, which has got quick release, which is always nice if you don't want to swap it out, whereas the older version just had a NATO strap. So obviously that would wear a little bit bulkier and wear completely differently to a two-piece. Personally, I prefer the two-piece myself. So this newer strap just seems a lot more premium in my opinion. There's a lot more to it, it's thicker, it's got a bit more quality. Whereas the NATO just tends to be a little bit on the thin side. And just, again, NATO straps aren't my favourite either. So when it comes to the cases and the way they transition toward the crystal, that's also slightly different with these two. I wouldn't necessarily say one is better than the other, they're just different in the way they go about it. When it comes to the hardware on these straps, again, slightly different. So the newer version has got a more rounded finish, but again, they are both titanium. So what first appears like just a slightly updated version with a different movement, it's actually got quite a lot of subtle differences between the two really when you look at it in detail. When it comes to the loom, they're both just as good as each other. So it's BGW9 on a printed dial, so it's not the best, but it's not too bad. But now let's show you how they both wear on wrist. Starting with the older version, so this is on the NATO strap, and you can see we've got those fairly long lugs on this, so that does affect the way it wears quite a bit compared to the newer version. I've got the bulk on the underneath because that's the way I tend to wear my NATO straps, because I'm not the biggest fan of it adding the bulk on the side. I think it looks a bit messy, but other than that I think it does still look good, and it does wear nicely on my 7-inch wrist. But now let's check out the new one. So straight away you can see it's got a totally different fit with that far shorter lug to lug, the more curved lugs as well. It's also got a totally different look because it is a more dark titanium finish with a matte finish as well, as opposed to the brighter version on the other one, and also with that polished bezel. So it really does give it a totally different kind of feel and look. And again, as I say, this is a two-piece, so it does wear a little bit less bulky no matter how you wear it. So overall, I think all the little changes add up to a really good package. I definitely prefer this over the older version, although the older version was still nice, but I definitely prefer the changes they made to this one, especially that movement and removing the Berny branding. So if you're interested in picking one of these up, links are down in the description as always. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.